Hello, everybody. So this is my Firestarter chat. So I thought that a nice picture of a fireplace during the winter would be nice, cozy, and comfortable. Figured I'd put that up there. First, I just want to talk a little bit about who I am. My name is Kevin Gallagher. I'm an invited assistant professor here. You saw my face on a slide earlier, so I'm just going to skip over a lot of this. I have a lot of research interests, mostly involving where the human element and technology intersect, and specifically cybersecurity. But I want to really point out three big ones here. The intersection of democracy and cybersecurity is a big interest of mine. I'm also incredibly interested in distributed systems and blockchain, which also make appearances on here. But I believe that those two kind of serve in the interest of the first. And I have a research mission as well, which I know I've not heard a lot of people talk about this, having a research mission, but basically the way that I choose the problems I want to work on, I want to use interdisciplinary cybersecurity, privacy, and computer science research to solve societal problems and advance human rights. These are the types of problems that really interest me. But I would like to talk to you about a specific piece of work that I've worked on recently and some of the ways that we can move forward with that work. So let's give a little bit of background. Let's talk about organizational structures generally. In organizations, there's actually a spectrum of ways that organizations can structure themselves. On one end, we have extremely hierarchical. You've got someone on the top and they send down a mandate and the people below them must do the mandate or get kicked out of the organization or some other negative repercussion. For example, if this is a military, maybe jail or prison if they don't actually follow the order that was sent down to them. If it's a company, you get fired, etc. And then all the way on the other spectrum, we have other end of the spectrum, we have horizontal. So we have hierarchical versus horizontal, where we have organizations and groups that run themselves without a leader, or sometimes they have de facto leaders, but oftentimes it's fully distributed and there's some form of organizational consensus. A lot of people are probably thinking, what organizations run themselves that way? I've never heard of this before. Well, I have some things here for all ends of this spectrum just to motivate where different groups and different types of organizations fit on the spectrum. All the way on one end, we have typical militaries, right? We have businesses that are pretty close to that. NGOs that are somewhere in the middle, oftentimes. Then we have trade unions, which are, depending on the trade union, could actually sit anywhere across this, this actual spectrum. But in some cases, they tend to go closer to the horizontal. And then we have activist groups and protest groups and all of these other societal actors that aren't working towards business aims, but other sorts of aims all the way on the fully distributed end of the spectrum. And these are just examples. There are multiple different organizations that could fit at different points inside this spectrum. But there's a problem, which is that technology, specifically technology and cybersecurity, tends to come out of early military and company applications. And because of that, they usually have an intrinsic assumption of hierarchy. And this can be seen in designs of access control, client-server architectures, and other centralized technologies. We do see this paradigm start to shift with peer-to-peer, but the access control aspect of that has always been hierarchical. With Mac mandatory access control, you have a system administrator and a system that designs who gets access to what when. In DAC, the resource owner, it's considered to be one resource owner, decides who gets to see it. And whoever owns, for example, the list in the machine that says, what file is owned by what individual, whoever has administrator privileges could change whatever they want. In RBAC, role-based access control, someone has to assign and take away roles. This as well is a massive hierarchical power. So almost every form of access control that existed has some element of hierarchy baked in. Even most distributed technologies assume some amount of hierarchy. For example, for Bitcoin and blockchain, there's the issue of, well, who gets to change the Bitcoin and blockchain source code? And can they modify that source code to ignore certain blocks? Yes. So there is even some form of hierarchy and understanding there. And here's the real problem, that a mismatch between an organization's governance structure and the structure that their tech assumes can create vulnerabilities for the organization. So I'm going to talk about a paper in a second called Callback. Before Callback, one of the co-authors had done some ethnographic work with different organizations of different horizontality and was talking with the trade union. The trade union had an issue with access to their resources when they decided to be more horizontal, because they had a small set of individuals running their technology who, once those individuals didn't agree with a decision made in the organization, decided to just cut the access of all of the people inside the trade union to the technology that they relied on, which is super problematic. What is the problem here? Fundamentally, that there's a small set of people who hold all of the technological access control power, and that's not how the organization is structured. The organization wants it to be more distributed. So a big question that motivated me was, why is technology made to only reflect the organizational structures on the hierarchical side of the spectrum? And I wanted to address this and not really answer this question, but say, this isn't true anymore, by throwing in my own system. So I created a system called Callback, which stands for collective-based access control. The whole concept here was to shift cybersecurity from a hierarchical, strictly hierarchical design to something that's a little bit more flexible. This was joint work. It was submitted to and accepted and presented at the New Security Paradigms Workshop and will be published at the end of the month for people to read. If they allow for open access payments, I'm going to pay to have it open access so that this way everyone will be able to read it. And the overall goal of this work was to create a collective-based access control system that allowed for flexible and dynamic democratic participation to fit the needs of the organization that was using it. So in other words, access control, where who gets to access what resources at what time, was not decided by a small set of administrators, but rather by the organization on the whole. And there are some properties with this. It's flexible in its horizontality. Not everybody's going to be voting on everything. That would cause voter fatigue, right? Imagine if every single time Parliament wanted to vote on something, they'd send a letter to your house and they go, what do you think, right? You'd get pretty sick of that pretty quickly, I think. So we allow for a flexible amount of horizontality where in issues that you want to be actively involved in, you can vote. If you don't want to be actively involved, you can instead nominate or delegate a representative, a lot like a parliamentary-like system. Another property here is that it's easier to revert to democracy than to form lasting hierarchy. This is because of technical details of the system that I'm not going to go into due to time limitations. There's guaranteed transparency in every action taken in the name of the collective. And this could be applied either to a single machine or a distributed setting. We have many, many, many open questions still after this paper that I will be devoting a lot of my future time to solving. And I would like, this is a Firestarter talk. It's supposed to get you thinking, right? Here are some of the questions I would like you to think about. How can we make something like this more flexible by creating perhaps a formal representation of a governance structure, such as a language, and creating an access control system that takes as an input this formal definition of governance structure and fits its needs. That's not something Callback does quite yet, but it's a first step. So here's something that I'm going to be putting in a bid for a master's student to like hopefully attract some help here. But can Callback or a Callback-like system be used to mitigate the possibility of a malicious administrator in high threat scenarios like Parliament, where we have administrators who are administrating networks where they're working with high stakes things like party confidential information, who have their own political leanings. Every single person who is a human has their own political leanings. I'm not convinced otherwise. And could be motivated by these political leanings to spy on a party or potentially sabotage. Can we use a system like this to mitigate that possibility? And just generally, for democratic technology, what other technological primitives beyond access control must be reimagined to achieve more democratic technology? And that doesn't mean just technology for democracy, but democratizing the technology itself. So these are all things I would like you to think about. Just let me know if you have any brilliant solutions and we'll work together on them. But if not, that's fine, because I'm going to be working on these questions in the upcoming years. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Questions? Sorry.
I do have a question. So,
Sure.
I just remembered something called Sudsy that was from the 90s, Buffalo Lampson and Ron Rivest, where they had, I was trying to look up, they had these decentralized trust naming scheme where you can delegate trust. Do you know of this?
I don't know of this scheme in particular, but I am aware of several delegation schemes. Oftentimes, these schemes start from the assumption that there is a group or a singular individual who has the right to delegate trust on a given object, which ends up being more or less the same problem as DAC, where this isn't actually democratic. It's just, I don't want to handle this right now, so I'm going to delegate it to someone else or some other small group, which is still centrally, very, very centralized. I think the concept here is more when multiple people get together to agree to delegate control of a singular resource or a set of resources to a person or a set of people. So similar, but slightly different. Any other questions? There's like so many technical details that I zoomed past. For those, when the paper is published, please give it a read. It goes into a formalization and there's graphs in there so you can see all of the different structures. It explains how it uses capabilities. All of those interesting technical bits are all in the paper. Thank you, everybody.